because I feel like a lot of what I'm dealing with is just surface level stuff, like clothes being left, or like I don't like do the dishes quick enough, like that kind of stuff. Like really early stuff, which is like, it seems,
Okay, let me say this. After 40 years, you'll still be there.
Okay. Yeah.
Hi guys, welcome once again to the lounge room. And this time our discussion will be a little bit different, maybe a bit unique, because I want to talk to you husbands and some of you men and the challenges that we are facing now as husbands in this lockdown. And it is interesting that we have now with me Joshua, who's been married for just over 1.5 years, Carvin, who's been married for over 8 years, whereas myself, Diane, and I, we've been married for over 40 years. Now the question is, does it get easier just because you've been married longer, especially in this situation? Well, you'll see in our discussion. I believe you will enjoy it. Mind you, our second session, we will continue this discussion concerning the domestic violence that are happening. It is really important for us to discuss this thing, because we need to tackle this issue. I hope you enjoy our discussion. Bless you guys.
Welcome, guys. Hey, we're just sitting here and having a conversation, just chatting away about husbands and, just life in general, especially during this lockdown. And I think, Josh, you were just mentioning something about, just being a husband is what, you're like a year and a half.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I've just been noticing a lot over the last few months. Well, I guess personally for us, being in isolation and being at home constantly, there's a lot of opportunity for us, for Abby and I, to kind of rub each other the wrong way, or like conflict on a lot of stuff. Yeah. There's a lot of opportunities for friction, and I know that we're not the only ones dealing with that. And so, but, considering the biblical perspective and everything also that Dad has taught me, just the idea that the husband, that we're to live our lives for our wives and for our family. And so knowing that it's from this incredible place of submission, and that I'm supposed to die to myself in everything, kind of realizing that this last few months has been probably for us and for me, probably the first like real extended test of that. It's a principle I've known about for years, and when we got married, it's something that obviously I had to live with for the first year. But having only been married for 1.5 years, this lockdown has probably been the first real test of that. Yeah. And it's just kind of got me thinking about, how interesting it is that this is what we're called to do as husbands, and living a life of submission, but how hard it is. And then kind of wondering, well, like for all of you guys, you've been married a lot longer, and I don't know, I wanted to kind of put it to you guys and see how you've sort of gone with it. And, over the years, has it gotten easier? Has it gotten harder? Has it, like, I know you guys are coming up on 8 years, which is it's pretty cool.
Yeah, this next month, October, it's going to be
what?
8 years for...
8 years?
8 years.
Wow.
Awesome. And I feel like, we look at that number and it's like, wow, time has kind of flown by in a lot of different ways when you see that. And yet, you see the growth, whether having kids or moving from, like, we've moved house, and, a lot of things have transpired, during those 8 years. And I think, to even answer your question, Josh, does it get easier? I think it's more about it gets, you start to understand what is required of you. And especially with myself, like what I have to choose to do. Like I can see choices now that are more clear that I have to make for the healthy marriage and the healthy communication between Anna and myself. And I can see, okay, I can either go this way and what I want to say or what I want to do, that I kind of know what that's going to bring, if it's going to cause more conflict, if it's going to cause more, turmoil in the house, whether that means we're arguing or not speaking, or am I going to take that route as clear as the Bible talks about, just kind of laying my life down or laying my opinion down. That's really what it is. I feel like me being right, or I'm learning, I should say, especially at this point, being right is not really the issue. It's actually not really what I should be focusing on, because even in my, I was correct, doesn't actually make our relationship any healthier.
Right. Absolutely.
And look, I definitely no expert in it at all, but I think that's one thing I've kind of come into very close contact with. The whole right thing actually means nothing. It's actually the experience of learning how to listen, learning how to compromise in a way that we grow together, than opposed to me tell or say or act out what I think is the right thing to do. I think that's what's been
it's
good
really
for me.
It's really interesting, because Josh began with the whole thing of, especially situations like this, that we've been married for 1.5 years, you're 8 years coming. I've been married for 41 years, and the thing that you mentioned is that, there are situations where you rub the wrong way, against each other, and after 40, over 40 years, just over 40 years being married.
Wow.
You will rub against each other until today. We still do. All right? That's what marriage is. It's just two individuals trying to live as one, as the Bible calls it, And two brains, two minds. So, and we have to work with each other. And I think you hit the point really well, how the idea of being right, I think that is probably the biggest thing in any relationship, especially in marriage. And often I when I talk to a young married couple and I ask them, because talking about stuff like that in relationship and with their wives and their husbands, and I always ask that first question: how important is it being right to you? That's my first question. How important is being right? And I said, my comment is always, if it's really, the level of the importance will be the measure of your trouble in your marriage. And I think especially in this situation, like in the bigger sort of picture, family. I think we're talking from a biblical point of view. All right. The world offers all kinds of options for relationship, family, and marriage, and all that. But the Bible is very narrow. Husband and wife. It's the beginning of everything. If you get that right, I remember when I was in our first anniversary, somebody told us, I think a friend or a pastor, he said the best way to love your children is loving your wife.
Because they see it.
And
they pick up on it.
And the security of your children is watching your mom and dad loving each other. Now that seems easy, but you have to work at it. And I think the Bible is very clear. Now, obviously, traditionally, the husband is the leader, and the Bible talks about the wife to submit to the husband. And the world doesn't like that, all right, because the whole idea of equality. But I think when you talk about equality, yes, we are all created equally, but function differently. That's what the world forgets, because they're so intense in fighting for equality that no, we are all created equally. However, we function differently.
Yeah.
So, and the Bible is very clear in that. Now, I think the good thing about the Bible, as explained in Ephesians 5, the husband and wife.
Yeah.
So it said, wife submit to the husband as the church submit to Christ. Husband is the head. It's like, wow, that's just, where's the equality in that? No, the equality is like the wife submit to the husband as the leader lays down his life for his wife.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so my question often, in any situation, in marriage situation, my question is to the ladies sitting in the church during the wedding ceremony. Ladies, if you can find a man who will deny himself and make you everything and serve you in any way he can and empower you, we don't submit to such a man. Is that a problem?
Yeah.
To submit it? Then it's like, well, I'll have him.
Yeah.
I mean,
I remember, Bram, you said something to me that was even on this topic, but even looking at it, it kind of covers everyone, whether you're married, whether you have a family as far as kids, whether you're single. It covers everyone, because before I was married, you told me something that I never quite heard it this way. And it was just a matter of how we govern ourselves and how we actually practice self-control in our own lives is going to show in our marriage, because believe it or not, you'll still have to practice self-control. And I didn't quite understand that going into marriage until I got married, and it was like, oh, I'm so glad I got that bit of wisdom, because I started to think on it a lot more. And sure enough, I mean, whether it was an emotion that I felt, whether it was trying to be right, it was that self-control that I actually had to learn how to practice. And I think anyone, especially if you're not married, I think practicing that or getting those things, that you notice about yourself and start to really practice that discipline, it becomes a lot easier when two brains and two minds and two heads come together, because you start to really see it's not about me being, having the last word or recognizing that I'm the one right. Actually, it comes into play in a huge, huge way.
Exactly.
I think self-control is a big, big deal, especially now. I mean,
so self-control is probably the opposite of self-importance, isn't it? If I can say. So in marriage, if you see yourself as very important, well, how do you handle your rubbing against each other sort of situation? What do you do? Your experience, what do you normally do?
Well, I think all I really can do is kind of look at what the foundational truth is. And so I guess this is where it's been a test, because I know ultimately that if I'm holding on to an offense, or if I'm holding on to trying to be right, I know that that's not helpful, and I know that that's not biblical, and I know that holding on to that entitlement is only going to end up being way worse for me. So it sounds super cliche, but all I can do is hold on to the foundational biblical truth, which is, that I'm laying down my life, and I essentially, by taking up the cross, I've said goodbye to the things that I think that I need, or the things, the things that I feel I deserve as a human in my flesh.
That's right.
And so, for what I do personally is I often have to pray. I'm like, if there's a moment where I'm like offended, or if I'm like, say, a little bit annoyed, or even if it's literally just a morning where I'm like in a mood, and I can acknowledge it and recognize after that, all right, God, what's going on here? Like, that's actually probably the most common prayer that I've done a lot lately is like, okay, what's going on, God? Like, why do I feel this way? Why am I upset by this?
Good.
And what do I need to let go of here?
Yeah.
Like, God, show me what it is that I need to remove. Because I still, I think something that is still helpful to do, and I think Australians are very guilty of this. It's a cultural thing. I think it's this false humility where we deny ourselves, but in an unhealthy way, in a way that's like, there's no problem, and that's where it ends up with a lot of passive aggression.
They don't actually acknowledge
no
the
one
problem.
actually talks about anything. It's just this. It's in the workplace. It's at schools. It's a very like, I don't want to tread on your feet, but then it builds this resentment in the background.
Right.
So I still think that it's really healthy to be able to talk about this stuff, but I really constantly have to be like, all right, God, help me take away the offense from this and help me acknowledge why I feel upset, so that now when I go and talk to Abby, my wife, I can be like, okay, well, this is the issue. Or like, this is something that I've noticed, or, and you just have to, it's really tricky. But the first thing I genuinely just have to do, especially if I'm like upset, I just walk away and I'm like, all right, God, like, why do I actually feel upset?
Yeah.
And probably more often than not, I'd actually say over 50% of the time. So more often than not, I pray, and then God's like, this issue is completely your own. Deal with it yourself.
Yeah.
And I don't even take it to Abs. I'm like, oh, okay, all right. Yeah, like, God, I'm sorry, I repent. And, a lot of it's just like the kind of day-to-day stuff.
Yeah.
Of as we've been living together now for a year and a half, I feel like there's a lot of things that we're compatible in, so it actually hasn't been too difficult. But like sometimes little practical things that I'm like, okay, it's actually not a big deal. Not even that it's like I'm just like burying it. It's actually just not worth me bringing up. I'm only upset because I want to, like, my flesh wants to be upset about something.
Yeah.
But I don't know. That's why I'm interested to hear you guys, because after 8 years, but also after 41 years, you're no longer not compatible in the way that you live. I imagine that, especially after 40 years, you're like, the way that you guys live is just the way that you run your household, and there's no things that great. So like, what are the things that grate on you, I don't know, after 40 years in a time like this? And like, are they the same? Like, are there still little things that bother you and that's just how life is? Or does it get deeper? Or I don't know, because I feel like a lot of what I'm dealing with is just surface level stuff, like clothes being left, or like I don't like do the dishes quick enough, like that kind of stuff. Like really early stuff, which is like, it seems,
Okay, let me say this. After 40 years, it'll still be there.
Okay. Yeah.
All right? So I think the thing about, for me, as a husband, we can say, lay down your life and all that. It's all conceptual.
Yeah.
All right? But what does that really mean in real life? I think I've learned that it's about creating a space.
Yeah. Yeah.
For their mistakes, for their idiosyncrasies.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. Create a space for your differences.
Yeah.
And not only to tolerate differences, but learn to celebrate that differences.
Yeah.
Like, Mom is very pedantic, everything is its own place.
Oh yeah.
Now, after, for a while, it's like, oh man, does it have to be like that? But I think what I learned from Mom from Diane is, you just learn to laugh at yourself.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that I really learned a lot. She is good at laughing at herself.
Yeah.
And don't take yourself too seriously.
Yeah.
And it's, whenever something is spoken against you, you have to know, the first thing that I learned to decide is, it's not about me. It's about stuff. I keep saying myself that. Because what happened is a counselor once said, when any person, whenever there is a threat, when they feel unsafe, they go back to their little child.
Yeah.
And he said that little child, only you can talk to him.
Yeah, yeah.
Not even your wife can talk to him. She doesn't have that power. Only you have that power.
Yeah.
So I think self-coaching is very important.
Yeah.
And you know what? I believe. Let me say this concerning marriage, right? I don't know how much time we got left, but I really believe it is the one thing that union of a man and a wife is the one thing that speaks the truth concerning the union between Jesus and the church.
Yeah. Wow.
You destroy that, you destroy the concept.
Yeah.
And it's worth fighting for. And I remember talking about marriage with Ben. And I said, with all the ministry, all the experience we have, I said, at the end of the day, if the only legacy that I leave, that my wife and I, Diane and I leave for the next generation, is that they remember how much we love each other, let it be so. Not how big a church we build, what sort of size of ministry, no. The fact that we love each other to the end, let it be the legacy. Because it is a testimony of Jesus.
Yeah.
I
think that's perfect. I actually think that's a perfect way to end, because it's so many. Ministry has become more about churches and actually less about family, less about marriages. Where actually that is the example that Paul gives us. Marriage is compared to Christ and his church.
Yeah.
So now, Bram, thank you.
Yeah. Awesome.
That's awesome. Well,
we're still working.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm still working on me.
Well, I'm definitely still working to.
What this guy I talked to, it was good. He's obviously a psychologist, a counselor. And he said, because people always say, even though it's stereotyping, but the truth is there, that men love their caves, the men with their caves.
Yeah, yeah.
And he said there's nothing wrong with the cave. It's what you do in the cave. It's like when you go into your man cave, it's like it's okay, but talk to that little boy how he is to behave.
Yeah.
That's what you do in your cave, and then you go back to your wife. As a whole man.
Yeah.
So
and that will create a healthy atmosphere.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. Thanks, Bram.
Pleasure.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, Carvin.
It's good, Jones.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Bless you guys.
See ya.